Well, I want to thank all of you for having me, and I definitely have had a few of you ask me why I've come all the way from Boulder, Colorado to Perth, Australia. And I sat with that for a little while. And the honest answer is that in December of 2019, I was in New Zealand celebrating my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. My mother is from New Zealand, and we were there with her entire family. I'm named after a farmer who lives in Palmerston North. Her husband died of a heart attack when they were in their 40s, and she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Then her children were diagnosed with cancer. And I was standing on that farm at Christmas 2019 when Australia was on fire, and the sunsets were so raw and so red, and it was so obvious that Australia is tip of the spear. And I realized that whatever happens here, it is going to happen here first. And that what we are learning in real time in Australia is absolutely going to be valuable lessons that are going to serve the rest of the world. So when I was invited to speak at evokeAG, it was a very immediate yes because of these connections that I have to this region. But I also very fundamentally believe that however goes Australia, will go the rest of the world. So you are the tip of the spear, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to get to Perth for this incredible event. It's been an incredible conversation, and I'm so honored to be here. Food is so much more than just food. It is so personal. It's how we were raised, it's our family, it's our culture. There's so much in it that's indigenous. There's religion, it's social, it's economic. And what we are learning is that it has the ability to either hurt or to harm. It has the ability to hurt or harm us as individuals. It has the ability to hurt or harm the soil. It has the ability to hurt or harm the climate. And in the US, 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women are expected to get cancer. In Australia, it's 2 in 5. Those statistics are driving incredible trends in food and agriculture today. Consumers are demanding transparency, they're demanding to know where their food comes from, and it is not because they want to put it on Instagram. It is because someone in their family is suffering from something really acute that none of us would choose. Nobody chooses to have cancer, and it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on, because when someone you love is diagnosed with it, our hearts all break the same way. So over the last couple of days, we've heard about a lot of these trends, and they are incredibly important, and I don't want to minimize any of them, especially here in Perth, because 50% of the exports that leave Australia come from this region, 20% of the food, on the backs of 3 million people. Think about that for a minute. That is extraordinary power and extraordinary productivity out of this region. It's why when we have these conversations, they are so fundamentally important. But again, we're kind of dancing in the shallows. What we're dealing with in food and agriculture and food systems and climate systems is absolutely enormous. And we have exceeded our carrying capacity of the planet. We are so far out over our skis with debt. And there's this incredible opportunity, again, to stop and to ask the question, are we going to harm or are we going to heal? These are some of the opportunities that are in front of us. You've heard from so many amazing entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors over the last couple of days. But of this pie chart, there are a couple slices that I really want to draw your attention to. When I co-founded Replant Capital, which was really focused on generating the capital to transition multinational food companies to regenerative and organic agriculture, one of the biggest obstacles was farmer debt. And when we first started that company, the debt in the US was $426 billion. That's how much our farmers carried. Today, US farmers carry $535 billion of debt, primarily to finance the agrochemical model. They have to take out loans to buy the chemicals. They have to take out loans to buy the treated seeds. They have to take out loans to make those farms run. That is so fundamentally different to how farming was 30 years ago, before the introduction of those genetically engineered crops. So the debt of US farmers completely reflects that model. I looked at the debt of Australian farmers. It's $109 billion. On average, an Australian farmer carries $2.5 million of debt. Do you know what that farm income is? A farmer's income, on average, in Australia is $70,000 to $90,000, while carrying $2.5 million of debt. So all of the solutions that we're talking about actually don't work if this math doesn't start to work. Because what we're starting to see is an escalating rate in farmer suicides. What we're starting to see is an aging out of the farm population. What you're starting to see is young people who are looking at that math of $2.5 million of debt and $70,000 to $90,000 in income and thinking, I don't want that. I don't want that. How do we make the math work here? The farming population in the US, that is the largest, highest suicide rate of any demographic. If you Google farmer suicide, you'll see it. It'll pop up in countries around the world. The math is not working for our farmers. I fundamentally believe that the way that we get the math to work is we get the soil to work. When you regenerate the soil, when you actually take that soil that has been so harmed and so abused and actually regenerate it and bring it back to its vitality, it completely changes the economics and the math of the farmer. Because instead of having to buy all of the inputs and all of the agrochemicals and all of the genetically engineered seeds, the farmer is actually working with healthy soil. Instead of having to buy seeds that have been patented and trademarked and licensed, and trait fees and licensing fees and revenue fees, the farmer is actually able to focus on regenerating the soil. The soil's carrying capacity for carbon is everything in these carbon markets that we talk about. How anyone can talk about a carbon market and not actually talk about the soil is so completely disconnected. It is the asset upon which the entire thing is based. One of my kids on Earth Day a few years ago came home from school and he was like, Mom, it is so depressing. We are not doing enough. We are not doing enough. And I said, Google soil carbon sink. And he did, and he ended up writing a report about it that I shared with my friends at Patagonia because it really showed that you can take a child, you can take a teenager, and this concept is so simple and so understandable. Soil has the capacity to hold water, to hold carbon, to hold nutrients. What we do to the soil, we do to our future. What we do to the soil, we do to our families. What we do to the soil, we do to our farmers. It is one of the most valuable assets in the entire agricultural system, obviously. And yet we fail to invest in it accordingly. So about 5 years ago, I was asked to present at the World Bank. And I tend to say things that are challenging the status quo. Because if we stay where we are really in a food security crisis. And last summer, the World Bank came out with a report called Detox Development. And as I read this thing, I mean, it was a page turner from the World Bank. And in it, they said, we are spending $7.3 trillion in subsidies to literally destroy the planet. It is insane when you look at it this way. And so the World Bank is now calling for a redeployment of these subsidies for us to think about the $7.3 trillion and how we might want to allocate that in a way that makes the planet livable for us and for our kids. And when I saw this report, I thought, this is amazing. This is the World Bank. It's not Greenpeace. It's not some like wide-eyed activist. Like, this is the World Bank talking about this. What we're talking about is prevention on the ground. You can either exercise prevention up front so that you head off disease down the road. We all try to do that as consumers. The same thing happens on the farm. How can we finance this adaptation? If we're going to talk about ag tech, if we're going to talk about water tech, if we're going to talk about food security and water security and climate security and national security, it starts with the soil. There are no carbon markets without it. So ESG, it's taking off. It's also incredibly polarizing. But when you look at the data around the growth of ESG investing in ESG funds, there is a 9.4% compound annual growth rate over the next 10 years. The size of this investment market is expected to be $46 trillion. Once you get into the T's, it's hard to understand like what that size is. The US GDP is $30 trillion. We have to think about capital as an ingredient in the food and agricultural system. We cannot fix this system with extractive capital. The reason our soil has been extracted is because the capital that's gone into the process has been extractive. The reason that the food is so highly processed and all of the nutrient has been extracted from it, same reason. The capital that's gone into it has been highly extractive. And for some reason, we have these industries like food and energy and all of these spaces where there's been so much development. And yet in finance, it's largely homogeneous, very homogeneous, 98% homogeneous. And when we talk about how we're going to fix these systems through biodiversity, the word diversity is hiding in plain sight in that word. And yet our finance system is so dangerously homogeneous. And if nature has taught us anything, it's that homogeneous systems will fail. So here's what's about to happen. It's not optimistic. I'm not being wide-eyed. There's data behind this from McKinsey, Bain, all of the consulting companies. There is a generational wealth transfer that is about to happen for the very first time. We've never seen anything like it. $30 trillion is about to change hands into the hands of women. We have never seen anything like this. If you want to understand what this is going to look and feel like, you might have wanted to be on that flight that I was on Monday from Melbourne to Perth after Taylor Swift's concert in Melbourne the night before. I got on that plane. There was a sequined cowboy hat taped to the side, boas. The flight attendants had boas on. The entire plane was full of Swifties. That generational wealth transfer into the hands of women of $30 trillion, the size of US GDP, is going to fundamentally change the financial system. How will we in food and ag take advantage of that? 60% of all college graduates now are women. And according to BlackRock, again, this is not some wide-eyed activist group, BlackRock has data that shows that when you have a hybrid team that has this representative diversity of gender and race, you will outperform by 29%. If anything needs to outperform by 29%, it is our food and agricultural systems. Diversity is absolutely fundamental to the success here. So we kind of get trapped in these debates, and things can get really polarizing. But if soil is the asset upon which carbon markets are built, and soil is what serves as this carbon sink to literally draw down the carbon that's in the atmosphere. This is not actually the choice, either one of these. And we are beyond the point of it being either or. We have to embrace the both and mentality. We cannot afford for the malnutrition and the undernutrition. We cannot afford the food waste and the waste of these resources and assets. It is so irresponsible, the food waste that we see today. The challenge isn't that we need to produce more food. The challenge is that we need to be more responsible with the resources that we're stewarding today. And instead of throwing away 30 to 40% of the food that we produce, which is what the United Nations says we do, we need to think about soil stewardship and farm stewardship and how all of us play a role in this. Because to put it on the backs of the farmers who already carry $2.5 million in debt on an income of $70,000 to $90,000 with suicide rates escalating at the rates that they are, there's a film that's coming in a couple of months that I am an executive producer on called Common Ground. It is the first film in the food space where we have been able to capture both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat, conservative, progressive. And the reason, again, is because when someone we love dies, our hearts all break the same way. When someone we love has diabetes, and the top countries for diabetes, China, India, Pakistan, the US, the burden that it puts not only on the system, on the family, on the healthcare system, how we invest today is how our children will live tomorrow. And I bet if I were to ask you guys how careful you are with what you put into your shopping carts, you would probably say you're pretty careful. We are. We try really hard to invest accordingly when it comes to our personal health. We need to do the same when it comes to our financial health and well-being. And unfortunately, for too many of us, we're sort of like disconnected from what those financial shopping carts hold. Do you know where your money sleeps? Do you know what it is invested in? Is it actually working to build the future for your children that you hope to leave them on this planet? Or is it actually harming the future that they're going to be inheriting from us? We hear vote with your dollar all the time about what we do in the grocery store, how we allocate our funds, how we save, how we invest, has such a tremendous impact on all of this. We've seen it. When Bayer acquired Monsanto, they lost in market cap the price that they paid for that company. That is where our power lies as consumers. There is such an opportunity to do better with the capital that is you, that is your hard-earned energy and your love and your time, and to think about how you're allocating that for your children and for tomorrow. To me, this is how we invest. This is how we invest at Montcalm. It is the only way forward. I cannot imagine doing anything differently. Just as you would not intentionally buy something in the grocery store that would cause harm to your children, we should be thinking the exact same way when it comes to our investments. We're going to hear from fund managers, some of the absolutely most brilliant leaders in the world on this topic in just a few minutes. And my goal is to make sure that this is accessible to anyone who wants it, that we can democratize this kind of investing because that's something you feel good about. That's something that you're proud to share. That's something that says all of the hard work that I've done today is building a better tomorrow for my kids and my grandkids and everybody that's coming after. It's supporting the farmer rather than throwing him or her into more debt. So the question then is like, who am I to do this, especially if I've been on the other side of things? I promise you, I've been on the other side of things. I was on a team that managed $20 billion in assets. I did not think about any of this stuff. All we thought about were returns. That's all we thought about. Who am I to do this? That naysayer that's in our heads, in all of our heads, can be pretty cruel and pretty mean. And if you listen really closely, it's usually not your voice. It's somebody else's voice that you've inherited that's in there telling you, who are you to do this? Who are you not to do this? This is happening on our watch. All of this that we've talked about over the last couple of days is on our watch. Who are we not to do this? So I invite you into this, what I call the stop protocol. It's in my book, Seeding Innovation. You've got to suspend that voice, because man, that voice can be mean. Tone police it. Would you ever talk to anybody, your children, your spouse, anyone, the way you talk to yourself? Offer a different opinion, and then practice that. Because it is like a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it's going to get. And I promise that we need absolutely every single person in this room to be participating in driving this forward. The opportunity in front of all of us is absolutely enormous. It is enormous. Legislators, we need the governance. We need the investor base. We need impact. We need the consumer. We need the medical community. Absolutely everyone in this room can play a role. So that if I were to come back 10 years from now, that there would be panels of all of you guys talking about what you've done to really invest, make this impact, and move the system forward. We've seen the clean food movement. We've seen clean energy. What we need next is clean money. Money's gotten pretty dirty with how it's invested. There is such an incredible opportunity here. And there will be naysayers. Those multinational food companies, when I first began speaking out about this clean food movement and why consumers wanted free from because of conditions like diabetes and allergies and autism and cancer, they did not want to accept that truth. The financial industry is not going to want to accept this. It doesn't matter. These movements, once they take hold, there is so much synergy and so much power in them. We've seen it in clean food, we've seen it in clean energy, and the time now is for clean money. So this is my last ask. Where in your life can you be maybe 20% braver? The word courage is derived from the French word for heart. To me, this work is and always will be a love thing. So I invite you to get really quiet and think about where you might just be a little bit braver. Don't try to do it by yourself. We all need supportive scaffolding around us. If I can help, please let me know. But as I leave you with this, that is the opportunity in front of all of us, is to be just a little bit braver in our lives, so that 30 years from now, when our children and our grandchildren are saying, what did you do when you knew the food system was such a disaster? What did you do? You can say, we did everything we could, and we made it better. Thank you.